So Josh, you've got a great story. It's super interesting. We kind of bumped into each other. It's the first time we've ever
Yeah.
actually met. We've talked a whole bunch,
Yeah.
but we've never
Yeah.
met in person. So we have a whole bunch of Zoom meetings that we've kind of met together
It's
with.
true. You're taller
Uh,
than I thought you were.
okay,
So,
that's good. Usually I'm the other way. I'm glad Ted's not here. Okay. But yeah, I would love to kind of hear your story. What intrigued me was the fact that you hear a lot about AI,
yeah.
but you don't hear a lot about the practical uses of
hmm
AI
hmm
and kind of where it kind of touches. And you and I have a pretty interesting, diverse network of people that we're overlapping in two or three areas. And I was like, wow, we need to kind of have this conversation. So let's start off with some a chance for you to tell us about AI, and then I have
About,
some questions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we probably all have opinions on AI already. I mean, it's been a few years now since GPT-3 launched. And that for me was like I don't know, it was like a crisis moment. Um, I put some slides together. This isn't going to be very pitchy, but I'll just to illustrate, just
Yeah,
click
and part of
through.
this is, we start off, we're going to talk about the company you're connected with, but your own personal journey
Yeah,
into
yeah,
this
yeah.
space and kind of how it's helping the community is
Yeah, yeah,
pretty interesting.
100%. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip forward and then we can bounce around. So this is very sort of loose for me. This is me. This is like my life. I'm the white kid on the top left, and that's my dad, who's like the most amazing human being ever. I'm adopted, and I was brought into a family without knowing that I was adopted. And I found that out in my teenage years, and it put me a bit on a little bit of a spiral as a young man, sort of late teenage years into adulthood. And so I joined the army at 20, and it kind of set me into I don't know, like a little bit of a path that made sense. It was like suddenly I had purpose and I had vision and I had a mission that somebody had handed to me, and I was an interrogator, so I did that for about 10 years. I worked in human intelligence and source operations, clandestine work. I moved to California to learn Korean, and that was like that was going to be the life. I was convinced that I was going to do that forever, and then I became a dad. And turns out, like being a dad and like doing clandestine work are not like very compatible. And so I got out. I ended up working for the Language Institute down in Monterey for a few years, and then that work was suddenly the rug was kind of pulled out from under me on that work with defense spending cuts that happened. It's like 12 years ago now. And then I was kind of jettisoned into tech, like because I had to go find a job. I was not technical, so I will not be the guy that stands up here and tells you all about the future of AI through like some deep technical explanation. But I did get to go through this program with DARPA that was a bit of a like a pilot program for AI tutoring, and the idea was that they would teach you networking and security in 5 months using only an AI to teach you. And this is this is 10 years ago. So that sounded really cool. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I commuted from Monterey to Palo Alto for 5 months. And it was effective to the point that I got a job. And and then that job led to another job, led to another job in startups. And I was at VMware and a company called Brocade. And then I was like head of influence for Apple for a couple of years. And with each of these sort of successive jobs, I felt more like a visitor. Like I'm coming into these places, magical things are happening. I had a bit of an exotic outsider story, and with that outsider story, people were entertained by it, and so they're giving me new opportunities, and I think I was making enough of an impact that I kept getting sort of like laddered up in this just like rocket ship that is Silicon Valley, and I got kind of lucky on the ride up, and I'm skipping a bunch, but ultimately I was head of marketing over at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a big venture capital firm here in the Bay Area, and GPT-3 launched, and I had already done obviously some work with AI. I had a sense of this we've known for a long time that this sort of big moment is coming. This like big transcendent change moment is coming with AI, and I think probably like you, Paul, I work around a lot of really, really, really smart technologists. Sometimes, a lot of times, those technologists are kind of disconnected from the people that the technology impacts. And so I've always felt like my job is to be more of an ambassador for those folks than to be the the tech guy. Um, and and that's not always welcome, um, but I think that my impression at the moment that GPT-3 launched was like an oh my god moment. It was like what's next? What's kind of like I don't. It's probably a mixed audience here. I'm sure there's some like very pro AI folks. There's probably some folks that are like that's going to kill us all. And I was wrestling with both of those things at the same time. And I was doing it from sort of the the pinnacle. Andreessen Horowitz, if you guys don't know, is like the VC firm, and I'm head of marketing, which is insane. And I'm like surrounded by people who are so much smarter than me, technically. And then I started asking questions like, well, what about what's the implication of this for my kids? I got two boys. They mean the world to me. That's them. They're the weird looking ones. Yeah, these guys. Yeah, Thad and Gus, and what is the world going to look like for them with things like pornography and identity and fraud and but also opportunities like creativity. I have a real passion for creativity, and I lead creative groups, and so I'm watching AI change film, and I'm watching it change content writing and creation, and so the question was like, where's AI going? And like, I don't know, where do you want to start? Yeah.
Well, where did it go for you? So you obviously kind of jumped into it, and you're investing yourself in areas. Tell us about the places
Yeah.
you're putting yourself.
Yeah. So I think that the first place it sent me into like sort of a dark spiral, and I mean that in like the truest sense of that. Like the implications of AI, for those who like it, I'll throw a couple. You can't see it on the back of the slide, but I threw a ton of questions in the background that are these like existential questions that just rattled through my head. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so like a few of those are like, who owns your identity? Like your actual identity. So if I'm a dad, I'm very like, I'm in love with my kids. If you get me talking, I'm obsessive. And like, but imagine that I were to die today or tomorrow or something, and my sons have to go through the grieving process. And there's enough of my digital, we're probably capturing this now, right? Is this on film?
Yeah.
So like, so there's enough of my digital presence that's like been captured that my sons could interact with the digital version of me that has my same humor, my same voice, my same like, weird idiosyncrasies. And on one hand, that's amazing because like that creates this like incredible like grieving tool. But on the other, like halfway through, I might try to sell my son a Subaru. And so like like what who gets to decide that? Like where does that decision making live? And like, I don't mean to be crass, but like the pornography question is a really strange one to me because like, we were talking about love never fails and human trafficking, and human trafficking is a driver behind the porn industry, or I guess reverse that. And so like on one hand, you would say, okay, well, AI sort of takes the human out of the human element out of the that equation, but it introduces this other paradox of what does it mean to be human, and what are the new dangers that we don't really understand. And so I still wrestle with those. And then on the other side, like I'm constantly in AI. Like I think I'm probably working in AI 16 to 18 hours a day.
Yeah, you have like a whole assistant staff that does all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
all the simple things like reply emails and contact
Yeah,
individuals.
they're not fully activated yet. So if you get an email, it's probably still coming from me. But yeah, like, and that's where we end up in this space where we're sort of symbiotically living with technology. And so for my sons, the first thing that and they've heard this now ad nauseum, is like they have an obligation. Learn whatever you need to learn in school, check the box, make your teacher happy, and then move on and really start to understand how to be fluent in this new tool, because the new tool is so much more relevant for the future you're going to inherit. You don't need to learn cursive or the Dewey Decimal System, like, but you better understand agentic workflows, and that's a completely different thing. It's like the rate of change is coming in a way that school systems aren't ready for. And so for me, what I ended up doing was I'm shouting this to everybody. I'm like, hey, like incremental change is not going to cut it. Not for doctors, nurses, lawyers, educators, anybody. And so if you talk to me at a cocktail party, like I'm 30 seconds in and I'm like everything, I'm like the crazy guy on the street corner. Everything's about to change. And I was saying that to a friend of mine who's a head of school for a K-5 school, real close to me. My sons had gone to it. And he's like, maybe you should just like join the school board and stop ranting. And I said, okay, fine. And so I joined the school board. I thought that what I was signing up for was like a 30 minutes every couple of weeks type thing. And then I got onto the board and I found out that, first of all, education is incredibly hard. Like the business of educating is really hard. And the school itself was going through, at one time, it was the biggest Christian elementary school, private school, in the Bay Area. And now it looks like this is its last year. Um, and I got there, with this sort of like short-term volunteer thought in mind, and then found out like, this is going to require way more of my effort than I'd anticipated. And in the process, we saved the school from closing mid-school year. It would have had to close in December, which would have been tragic for a bunch of kids. And then I fell in love with the school, with the parents and families, but also just with the mission. Like as a kid, because of my spiral, I was a terrible student. And I was like, chasing stimulation and whatever. And I felt unreached. And I see how much AI holds as sort of a promise to see every kid, to teach every kid, to like build a curriculum around every kid. And so then a lot of my focus started to shift as I worked with this community. And so I think we should build an AI native school. I think that should be the focus. And now, and so I'm on that journey. I've been lucky enough to go acquire a core tech and then build on top of that, which effectively does that. It builds a knowledge graph around every kid. And I'm trying to answer this question, which is like, the first part of it is the assumption. It's like the future of learning. It's not, it might change or it's going to change a little. It's like, no, it's going to completely reset. It's like 300 years out of date already. And we're about to go through just such a massive shift in the way that we teach and learn. Institutions aren't, a lot of them are not ready for that. Most of them, I would say, better than 95% of them have not really realized the moment. And so, yeah, that's the work that I'm doing now.
That's kind of cool. One of the things that I've had with challenges I've had with education is we picture a kid or a student, and then we have a pedagogy model where the teacher's knowledge is just dumped on the kid. And most of those kids can't receive it because it's not the way that they want to communicate. It's not the way they want to interact in relationships. And I think what you're talking about is the fact that you're still passing information, but you're pulling it through a learn request.
Yeah.
The learner gets to say, I want to hear that, but I want to hear it in the context that makes sense to my life. And AI is ever patient and can work through that, where our school systems could never do that. I could never.
I can't do it.
I can't do it either, right? But the AI will keep rounding the conversation until it finds the connection point where that information is being passed, which is amazing, right? In terms of the potential it has for helping people that come out of different challenging life situations. It'll keep rounding that or incorporating those issues with the desire to see changes in their life as well.
Yeah, we saw. So I mentioned I moved to California to learn Korean, and like actually this right here. So this was the language school before it moved to Monterey, and the Presidio, and it was a secret. It was like this clandestine school to teach intelligence operatives, first to speak German and then to speak Russian during the Cold War. And then the school grew to a size that was big enough that they moved it down to Monterey. And so I went through that school to learn Korean. We had two choices at that time, Korean or Farsi. And the school is it's the best language teaching school on the planet, outside of the Mormon school, which actually ironically does a better job. But don't tell them I said that. But the thing about learning language is like the certification doesn't matter. Like you speak a language or you don't speak a language, and it doesn't matter what your piece of paper says. And so it's a bit of a pressure cooker. And where we're at now, I think as information becomes commodity and access and being able to recall and digest information, that's commoditized. And so the thing that we're moving away from this sort of like checklist into much more of a, like, how are you creatively applying that information? What is sort of your base of wisdom that you do with that information? You have this, like, I just handed you this Harry Potter wand that does everything. And so now the real question is, like, what do you do? What do you do with that new power? It's like this incredible power. And so I think that, that's the big shift in my mind, is we're shifting from a sort of rote memorization system where teachers have internalized that for generations. And so, like, if you tell a teacher, hey, testing isn't the goal, like, I get sort of like ushered out of the room. It's like, well, if I say the goal is understanding, right?
Yeah. Well, how am I supposed to get my bonus if I don't
Right.
teach well enough to the test, right?
Right.
So yeah, there's a whole motive. But I can also tell you my own experience with Google, getting in a cab in a country that was not my native speak, and telling that cab driver where to go. He agreed to it, and my phone is telling me we're going the wrong direction. So then I actually pull up a translator, and I say what I'm asking him for, and suddenly, I didn't spend any language school training,
Yeah.
but I was suddenly speaking Farsi
Huh.
to an individual who then could reroute and get me to where I wanted to
Were
go.
you in Iran?
No,
Oh, okay. I was
no,
like,
it
wow,
was
that's an exotic
no, no,
trip.
no.
Uh,
It's a place where I don't know why cabbies don't. Yeah, anyways, so yeah, the language was a second issue. They
yeah.
just drive, right,
Mhm.
and they make more money if they drive you to the wrong place.
Yeah.
So, so
Take you the long way.
exactly. So I just want to make sure we're going the right place, and I was going to get out of the car at the right place. So
Yeah.
anyway, part of that is that we now have that magic wand. We have that ability to, if we think about something, there is a tool there that we can use to go get there, and that's
Mhm.
increasingly going to be more available for the community. But there's also some community improvement capabilities with this as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's the part that, like, gives me hope, because I initially started with, if I go back to that moment, GPT-3 launches, and, like, just picture this, okay? So I feel like an outsider when I'm sitting in a room and we're doing deal review, right? So deal review for a venture firm means, like, you're a wizard over at Google and you just cracked some code on how to make some really cool thing, and you've decided you're going to leave Google and go start a company, or you're a PhD at Stanford and you're rethinking money or something. Like, your first stop is, as you fundraise, is generally our office. Like, and so I'm getting this really high density information that's, like, really cutting edge, and it's just every day, like, my jaw's on the floor, my mind's blown, and I'm in a room full of people that are like, yeah, but lunch is coming. And so there's, like, such a, like, it was a disconnect for me. And, like I'll put one out there that has launched since. There's a company I talk about this a lot, a company called Reflect.ai, which is fascinating. You can order sunlight at night. They have, like, a network of satellites, and you can order from your phone reflectors to, like, point sunlight onto you at night. And that's, like, the craziest thing in the world to me. And like, there's so many companies that do things sort of that scale that's, like, mind blowing. And then AI comes out, GPT-3 comes out, and everybody's jaws on the floor. And I'm like, finally, welcome to the club. And so, like, I went through this phase where I was kind of on both sides of the fence. I'd ask, like, the techno optimists, like, what does this mean? And they'd say, this is where, like, technology brings us into utopia. And then I would talk to, folks like Eliezer or whatever, and they're like, this is where technology kills us all. And I was like, you're both pretty convincing. Like, yeah, honestly, like, you both have pretty strong evidence. And if I let myself spiral on the negative, like, there is no bottom. And on the positive side, it really is the hyperbole kind of, it does live up to the hyperbole. And so I choose to sort of, like, row in the direction of the positive, because I do think that it holds a lot of potential. And the potential, like, for AI to teach and to learn is really incredible. Like, that app you're talking about, where, like, we build agentic flows, I built that. I don't code. Like, I built, like, a fully cloud native agentic line graph stack on the back end, and that is, like, me and AI symbiotically building a thing. And what I am a bit concerned about is, like this slide. By the way, AI made that image, which I think is amazing. Um, is it sort of illustrates that, like, technology has always been decisive in predicting or determining outcomes for students. And like, if you have access to the internet, if you have access to smartphones, if you have access to computers, like these things, because as we sort of like move forward as a species, those things are really determinative in your future. And that gap seems to widen with AI. Public school systems are really reluctant to take on things like ChatGPT or AI-based tools because the system's so bureaucratic, it doesn't really allow for it. And then on the other side, you have, private schools for like wealthy kids, and they're just like, yeah, we understand, because like all of our students are kids of tech execs from Google, and so like we're getting all this tech brought in, and we're kind of seeing that divide open up even more. And so a lot of the mission that I'm on right now is like, how do we bring tech safely? How do we bring AI safely into the classroom without delay? And then how can we make it accessible for folks that are at sort of the bottom end?
So a couple questions, like what would a school look like if it were to fully embrace AI and its potential in terms of workload and prioritization? And what does that look like for a student coming through it? I mean, just kind
Yeah,
of like,
I have an opinion on what it should look like.
okay,
What it does look like is like, I guess sort of yet to be declared. Because like we said, we're moving from certification to wisdom, or from like checklist to understanding, and so the platform that we've built is all about checking for understanding. So you won't find multiple choice tests and stuff in there. It's all Socratic. It's like, here's the principle, here's the content. We're going to ask and answer questions back and forth, and conversationally, we're going to learn together. And as you go through a course, we're gauging against learning objectives. So you have a handful of learning objectives, and we really want to make sure that you've developed understanding towards those. But a lot of, like at the beginning of this deck, I said, the things that matter never change, and the things that matter, like it's not just screen time. I've got 2 kids. I don't want them on a screen all day. I want them on a screen for however much time is necessary to learn the thing. And so the ideal school, the school that's doing this best, I think, is Alpha School out of Texas. Alpha School has this idea of a 2-hour class period. 2 hours of the day is committed to learning and lecture, and then 6 hours of the day is committed to practical exercises and workshops. And so these kids are going out and they're starting businesses, and they're building gardens, and they're hands-on learning. And AI may augment those processes too, but I think where we end up looks a lot more like that. It looks a lot more like doing, and creativity is a major part of that. Than it does look like sort of assessments and learning, if that makes sense.
so what is it? What kinds of things does the educational process kind of move towards or concentrate on? Where do we see the benefits in our educational process, right?
I mean, here, it's kind of, I have here we go. This is my thing, so sorry for the pitch. But like, this is the way we're thinking about it, is like, first we build what you can think of, we call it an adaptive knowledge graph. You can think of this as like, we want to learn every student. We want to learn what their interests are. I'll make this more tangible. So my 9-year-old gets sick all the time. He got the luck lottery there. And so he hangs out with me a lot of days, and he misses class, and he's in 3rd grade. And I get tired of him just hanging out and playing Minecraft. And so like this past week, he was sick for 3 days, and my systems learned that he likes Minecraft and he likes pugs, which is weird, but he does. And so it built a 3rd grade math class for him, where the whole class is framed in pugs and Minecraft. And the kid played, like, he didn't play, he's learning. It's like he's learning, but for 3 hours, he's sitting there learning 3rd grade math. He's crushing it. I can see his tests, not his test scores, but his aptitude continually up and to the right as he's in the classes. And he loves what he's doing because it's immediately applicable. It matters to him. Like, as it tells stories, it's stories about a pug. It's like this, I think it's like a prince, and it's like got some royalty thing to it. And but in the Bay Area, we've got I think nationally we're 1 in 36 kids are autistic, which is an insane number, by the way. The Bay Area is higher; it's closer to like 1 in 29. And autistic kids are they're harder to teach because they're so sort of particular about the way that they want to learn. And teachers today, they build these individual education programs around every kid. or around their kids that have that demand. And the goal with an adaptive knowledge graph is that it would build an IEP for every single kid where we understand the kid. So it kind of starts from there, and then giving administrators agency over that. So not just your teachers, but your enrollment specialists, all the back of house crew that makes it school run, and then multiplying them out so they have agents that are super responsive to parents. And then it's values integrated. And this is something we hear a lot from parents is like, if I just pick on my two kids for a second, one of them, I told you I was obsessed. One of my kids, I really want to sort of build confidence. And another of my sons, I really want to establish a generosity sense to them. And so they may both be given the question of like, what's 10 minus 2? But for one son, it's like that you climbed to the top of a very tall tree and you were so courageous and you dropped 2 apples out of the 10 that you picked. How many apples did you come down with? And the other son will get, somebody was nice enough to give you 10 apples and you have an opportunity to give 2 away. And so they've solved the same math problem. They've learned the same academic lesson, but they've learned a completely different character lesson. And so building a school that's not just sort of up and to the right academically, but thinking about ways that we can integrate families and parents into the process. I think Siri's listening right now, speaking of AI. But like, making sure that you've got parents involved. That's been a huge issue for schools is like parents feel like they're kind of pushed out. They don't have any say over the value system that teaches their kids. And so that's kind of the way we think about it. It's like back of house is AI augmented. The student is AI augmented. Teachers are AI augmented. And it, in a perfect world that frees all of the staff to be much more human to human emphasis. So teachers are thinking about mentorship, not just rote learning and lecture.
Yeah. No, this is super cool because it isn't just for schools. I know you've got your other slide there, but it also it applies to some of the homeless concerns that we have. What we know is that 61% of the folks that are on the street have mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
They have addiction issues. And a lot of that are just they're symptoms of an underlying issue that go way back in their and to unwind that, to get them back to a place where they can choose a healthier lifestyle, you have to take that into consideration and kind of wrap around that. So this gives us that ability to be ever patient and kind of walk with individuals that have childhood scars, they have trauma issues. You can take all of that and kind of wrap a go forward plan around them and help them kind of take steps forward. You can measure that. And then you can also work with collaborative communities that are out there so that everybody does what they do best, but they work together for the individuals who are journeying through those organizations to take advantage of the services that they're best at.
Yeah. Yeah.
To really get them to a better place as a whole. So talk about like, what is the potential outside the education system, but also in the community about getting people to work together?
Yeah, I do a fair bit of work with like veterans communities. And it's so funny. Like we used to joke when I was in the Army that like being in prison and being in the Army are the same and we get the same food. And like, it kind of is. But the reality is like, whether if you're a transitioning service member trying to find a job, that's a hard thing to do. Because your skill sets don't necessarily map over. And so there's a whole bunch of retraining you have to go through. And that's also true with, folks that are, if you're living on the street in San Francisco, like there's so many barriers to just making it back in. And one of them is like your own, it's not even just like what you can prove, it's like what you can prove to yourself. And there's that gap of, it's like a confidence barrier. And what I love about the product that this isn't just a pitch for my stuff, but like what I love about the promise of AI on platforms like what we've built is it makes it possible for somebody to pursue an interest that they authentically have and become like more knowledgeable, more adept in that topic, whatever that is. So if you want to go become a lawyer or you want to like jump into the deep end of the pool on things like if I want to learn quantum physics, I'm so fascinated by what you talked about with like what is money, like and so like those types of questions, like that's such an abstraction, but like those types of questions, like how do you dig into if I'm 10 years old, but I keep hearing about like quantum computing, which by the way is insane, like how does a 10-year-old engage with that? And what AI makes possible is it can take that, it can level it down. So me as a 10-year-old, I can go through and learn it and understand it at my level, no matter what my language is, no matter what my learning abilities might be. And that's a type of learning that's never been accessible before. And so I pulled this slide up because like I spend a lot of my time thinking about like, well, what does the new wealth look like, or what does the new sort of fully formed human look like? And I think there is some version of this. This is not like a religious pitch, but I think that there is some version of this where like you really have to focus on the whole person. So if we're thinking about bringing somebody out of poverty, or bringing somebody off the street, or bringing somebody like where we're at in San Jose, 20% of the kids that live in the district where I'm at are underhoused, which is an abysmal number. And that means they're living in hotels, or living on the streets, or they're sort of couch surfing. And we have to think about ways that we're sort of like touching the parts of their growth that matter beyond just like, oh, did you get a degree? Did you go to college? And so I like, you know, I think that a lot of it has more to do with focusing on the whole person, putting them into community with other people. And AI does, like, it really is transformative in those ways. And it's not the fix all, like you guys are the fix all. Like, and I think that's the thing that we miss in tech. And it's like, if I got on, I know we're running out of time, but if I got on like a hard rant, it's like tech is not the thing that fixes this. Like hopefully it does away with like 90% of the tedious things that that distract us from the thing that actually matters, which is like human to human interaction, like being empathetic. And I'll end it on this. Like I met with the head psychologist for the Toronto Raptors, and I was teasing him because like AI came out, and I said, dude, your job's so easy. Like, how hard is it to be like, and how does that make you feel? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can build an AI that just asks that persistently. And I said, but really though, isn't AI going to sort of like take your job? And what he told me is, he said, he's like, you know, we had a laugh at his expense, which I enjoyed. And then he said, look, Josh, the reality is, like, I ask a lot of people if they're thinking about suicide. He said 100% of them say no, and there's a couple that don't mean no when they say it. And he said, and it's such a level of fine-tuned empathy that helps me see the difference. I don't think a system's ever going to understand that. And I think that like that perfectly encapsulated everything from how do you teach to like how do you mentor to how do you grow community to where should you invest your time. And so for me, like those are the things that I want to equip. And well, I'm not trying to displace teachers or administrators. I'm trying to get them out from behind their screens where they're grading papers at night and they're being badgered by parents for follow-up, and get them back into the place where they're mentoring students, where they're being empathetic, where they recognize when a kid's falling behind because they're having a hard life crisis or whatever. And I think ultimately that's where the real promise is like we get to be people, and some of this like tech overhead is hopefully receding a bit in the background.
No, I know that for me, the AI tool is helps me with my imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
right? Because I feel like I want to do good, but I don't know everything about this. I'm able to go quickly and learn and catch up.
Yeah.
My kids are really smart, but a quick AI search can make me just as smart,
Yeah.
really fast, or sound smart, right? And engage in a conversation that is meaningful for them, and doesn't make me feel distance from them, right? So
Yeah.
it can help for those of us that work in the community. It can really help us learn about challenges of an individual's life and quickly have a resource that says, oh, I know how to guide them, or at least know some general directions. So it can be a really helpful tool in terms of running into new problems and having an available resource that you can go to, and then maybe point to better people who have some great insights that can take the conversation or assist in that process a little bit further.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't know. I like, I'm optimistic. I go through days where like I do have a sort of deep streak of pessimism on some of this. I think the economics of AI is start to get really, really wild, and I don't know what that looks like. I'm learning today what a DAO is, which I'm really excited about.
Nice.
But like I don't really I don't find any value in spending time in what I'm afraid of. It doesn't mean that I don't have deep concerns or that like we build in a lot of cautions into the system intentionally because we think that I think that AI bias is perhaps one of the most pernicious things. And so like, so I'm very thoughtful in that way, but I also think that there's so much opportunity for us to learn and grow together that like that's really where I want to spend my energy, mostly because it makes me a happier person. But yeah.
Well, Josh, I really appreciate you coming down here. We want to like get some questions from
Sure.
our community here because everybody has some either concerns or things that they love about AI. So we want to kind of like pepper you with some questions. Hopefully you're comfortable with that.
Yeah. I can't promise to have answers for everything.
Yeah, first of all, fantastic. I agree with you that the jury may be out, but we're working with agents right now. We developed some agents, and I came up with this idea of circle of friends, and where instead of it having a static view of us and they are static themselves, that they learn from each other and they learn from us. So we enter into the group all around the same level. We could add a teacher if we wanted.
Yeah.
And now you have this group experience of the agent asking questions out loud, but also your own. And creating a digital twin basically of you ultimately through that process to be able to emulate not just what you would ask, but maybe preemptively think about what questions you would ask and be able to push things in the direction of your interest so that you retain the information.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really valuable way, a learning machine learning, as opposed to just an all-knowing, chat GPT that may hallucinate if you ask in rarefied areas.
It does hallucinate a lot still.
It does.
Yeah.
I have people
Yeah.
tell me things. I'm like, that's not right. Actually, I know better.
Yeah. We used to just be able to lie and get away with it, before the internet. I think that, one of the first like piece of feedback I got from somebody, an AI founder, was the thing he was most excited about was, you've heard it said like you're the average of your 5 closest friends. And it is likely that by the time my 9-year-old son graduates high school, that at least one of his closest friends, if not his girlfriend or whatever, is an AI. And we're watching ourselves sort of gradually move that direction already. You might know people that are like, I talk to this thing all the time. I feel like we're buddies. I just troubleshot an issue on my app the other night, and I was like, it took so long. It's like 3 hours of troubleshooting. And at the end, I was like, yes, I'm like typing in like, thank you so much. Never mind your machine. But I think you're right. Like being able to sort of twin yourself and, but thoughtfully, I think it is really important that we recognize that these are not humans, right? No. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We officially haven't launched yet. So like we're done. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I will happily. We are an AI native school platform. So effectively helping K-12 schools transition into being fully vertically integrated as an AI operating system for the school. So that helps everything from curriculum development for teachers, the student learning experience, the learning management system to track progress, the CRM to track everything from like early interest into enrollment. Think of us as an AI school in a box, and that's the platform we're done. I'll be launching at some point here in the next month. We're building partnerships right now with K-12. Sorry, your first question, that was such a tease that you would ask me that. So, I'll tell you one of the challenges I had as an interrogator, because that's such like a big scary word. And it wasn't like the Jack Bauer, like, tell me what you know. It was a lot more of like sitting in coffee shops and just trying to build trust with people in topics that are sensitive and potentially dangerous for them to share. Like I could never work in the Peace Corps. I'm officially disallowed from the Peace Corps for the rest of my life because of that. Like understanding sort of what does it mean to be human is something that I obsess on. I've obsessed on it a long time, and I don't think it's wise to assume that it comes down to your belief system on what is consciousness, and some people believe that AI has consciousness. I'm not in that group. And so I think that empathy, meaning like it feels what you feel and has a sense of obligation to navigate with you your feelings in a positive direction. Those are programmed responses right now, and I think it's going to be very convincing to mimic our feelings, but I don't think of AI that way. And this is recorded, so now the AI overlords know that. But like, but I don't think of AI as a person, but it is very convincing. And I worry that the impact that social media had on especially young girls, where their identity was so sort of put through this looking glass. AI is going to do that with relationships for us too, and it already is with apps like Get Honey and others, where it's so empathetic, it's so listening, and yeah, and so it's a good question. I don't really have an answer for you. It's not empathetic, but it really makes you feel like it is.
I think I'm dead here. Okay, I'm back. In the healthcare space, a lot of times the language that's communicated is very factual, academically correct. It's supposed to mitigate the risk issues of hurting somebody in the recovery. So it's whatever the insurance company in the hospital wants to say. The problem is the education level of the individual is not into consideration. So some of the healthcare spaces are doing empathetic statements of the same information. It says, say this in a kind way to an individual who's 15 or 25 or 45, and they come from this cultural background. So they're able to filter and communicate in a way that they're asking small bits of questions. And the empathetic effort is, I'm ever patient to communicate with you. And until you acknowledge the information that I'm about to share with you, I'm not done. And I'll keep going and trying a different trail till I find that way to get it. So is that empathetic? That's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I think it forever keeps looking for a way to validate that you grasped the concept so we can move to the next subject.
Yeah.
So
I see your hand. I will give me just like 2 seconds. So one last thing that I was just going to add to that is like one of the use cases that we've seen is in elderly care. And like if you don't spend any time with the elderly, most people don't. And so the elderly sit in care homes like where loneliness is crippling. And one of the things that AI actually does do is it'll listen to your same story that you've repeated every day forever, and it'll say this like in a unique way every time, like, wow, that's interesting, tell me more. And like that is real comfort. Like that's not artificial comfort. Like these are people who feel so lonely and isolated, and so there are going to be those use cases where like I think it does matter, but I think like for bless you. But I think as we're making decisions with our own lives based on the information that we're getting from systems, I think it's important that we have a sense of, this is like I put up like divine connection. Like you have to have a sense of enduring values for what do you hold most true, and I think that's not optional anymore. I think you have to have some sense of like what is my base operating system? Do I value human life over AI life? These are going to be questions that we have to grapple with, and I think that has to come from somewhere. Sorry, I made you raise your hand so long your hands probably went numb.
Yep. Which way do you want to go first? Here? Okay. There you
Right.
go.
Hey, Josh. Several of us in the room work with like the unhoused or people with barriers and so forth, and we know that training and sometimes retooling to get them ready to be sustainable is getting those living wage jobs, and and a lot of case management goes in with that. So I could see. Can you talk a little bit about how this system can really help kind of meet people where they're at and kind of finding out a little bit how they are wired and how to pursue a career, how to access resources, how to access help, and then some of that AI mentoring.
Yeah.
Is there a platform for that?
There is a platform. I feel like this is just such a softball pitch. So like, yes, so it just so happens. But there's so many barriers to learning stuff. Like literacy is one where a lot of folks don't have the ability to read, and a platform that's conversational that can hear you speak and speak back to you, and show the text and show images. like the more modalities you have, the faster learning happens. And so like if you're dealing with an unhoused population or somebody with learning disadvantages, like we have the ability with AI now to meet them exactly where they're at and then travel with them. So that means like all the way down in preschool, all the way up through elder care, you have a continuous learning management system. And so we've built platforms so that I can quickly stand up a course on any topic at a I'm going to say a PhD level, but if we're really honest, it's probably like a master's degree level. But we can bring in any topic and then level that up or down depending on what your student is ready for. So an unhoused person might want to know the fundamentals of electrical engineering, and we can start them at knowing 0 and then bring them up. And that was the thing that brought me here is the DARPA thesis was we want to take somebody who's never seen a computer and teach them how to be a Cisco certified network in 5 months using no humans. And I'm not saying that I'm the best in the world at that, but I got a job and it was a pretty effective job. So, and that was 10 years ago. It's way more effective now. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming here. I've been teaching AI classes for about 6 months, both in person and and online. And what I found is that, I want to be optimistic and give people a real sense of agency and control in how they're using it. So I've gravitated towards teaching people how to build custom GPTs.
Yeah, smart.
And I start with best practices in writing prompts and then progress that. And I just find that it really empowers the students to be like, okay, I'm not at the impact of this. I can take my expertise and experience and combine that with what the GPT knows and create this hybrid. I'm in control. It's mine. So I'm just curious, in your thoughts about how to teach AI itself to your students. Like what is your thought on how to give them that
I think that teaching AI, because it's so symbiotic, AI does a really good job of bringing you along. The part that I find personally my biggest sticking point is something I call the imagination gap. And I heard this because I do a fair bit of advising for founders. And one of the founders came to me and he said, my marketing team keeps coming to me and they're so excited how fast they can generate blogs, but they've never paused for a second to wonder if blogs are still relevant. And it so perfectly captured the problem, which is we now have the ability to solve problems that haven't been solvable before. And we stopped trying to solve those problems because they were intractable. And so if I'm teaching students AI, the first thing where I start before we even touch the keyboard or look at a screen is what are you actually trying to do? And maybe you could get out of your box. We're so conditioned in the box that we live in by the time we're 10 years old. And so when I talk to, my 7th grade son about not taking tests anymore, it's already a foreign concept to him. And so for me, I hear what you're saying. Best practices on prompts, by the way, is going to evolve so fast. It's hard to really know how to do that. But I think of it more as, let's start with first principles. What matters? What are you trying to accomplish? And then let's think strategically about how to accomplish that. And then where's AI going to help you? Or where do you just not know? And then it's okay to come in and don't overthink the system and just say, I don't know this. I think I want to do this, but I don't know. And then watch as it builds your level of understanding from a base layer. To me, that's where I start. I always start with what is the first principle? What are you overthinking and not being honest with yourself about? And what you currently don't know. Because we go into the system and we're like, oh, let me outthink it. And you can't outthink these systems. You really can't. Maybe a little bit right now, but 2 years from now, you won't be able to.
I work with an organization called Relational Peace, and our purpose is to help enhance communications with people, but in a constructivist way. And also we build on skills of empathy through genuineness, empathy, warmth, and respect. Okay, so we've got this group collaborative thing going all the way. And what I'm really curious about is that I tuned in with your idea that AI can be empathetic, of course, and also AI is constructivist because that's how I use it. I ask it any question I want to, and it's my teacher and my friend. And so what I'm curious about is in your platform coming up with the educational system and with schools, how does your particular model help to coordinate human interaction through collaboration and collaboration with the students and collaboration with the teachers?
I honestly, I think that's a really good question. Like the system that we've built doesn't intentionally that's not central to the way that I built the system, but is in the way that we're thinking about it. Like I think it's really interesting that I have a chat conversation with ChatGPT, and I really want to tell somebody about it, and I want to invite them in to be part of the conversation, but they currently haven't opened that up, and you should we should have a collaborative sort of shared conversation space. And so that's one of the things that I'm building in sort of the next iteration. But the way I think about this educationally is let's get the learning, the sort of rote learning, the base knowledge. Language is informative to me when I think about learning because that's where I kind of got my roots. And so we had to learn an obscene amount of words a day, like 200 to 300 words a day. And so we just dial in, we write it on flashcards, and we're doing flashcard work day and night. But the faster we get away from that into conversation, the more you're going to learn a language. And anybody who's ever traveled overseas will tell you learn a language faster when you're in country than you're ever going to learn it in a classroom. And the same thing's true for if you want to build collaboration, AI can help you get started, but working with a team is the only real way to do that. And right now we haven't. The platform itself is not built for that, partly because we're trying to optimize for homeschool students as well. But building some of those online communities, that'll be the next iteration. And it's not baked in yet, but it will be. Oh.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So two really questions to answer what you want. So first, I was curious if you would speak to how this affects sort of education's hidden curriculum around the creation of social norms, direct communication about knowledge, but also teaching girls to be quieter than boys,
yeah,
et cetera. I think we should all have mixed feelings about that. And second of all, there's this sort of professional epistemic framework that's based in linguistics and really based on how people are taught. Doctors speak in a certain way to each other because they've all been through the same 2 years of medical school.
Yeah.
It's efficient in some ways and restrictive and coercive in others. And this approach is different, and I can't tell whether it's good or bad to any of those.
Yeah. So the first one, this is actually the thing that first brought me into the education space is I do think that bias in AI, intentional and unintentional bias in AI is a major risk. And so what we wanted for an educational system is at its core to be able to put, the school should have to explicitly put, what is your mission? What is your vision? What are your values? And then every interaction with an AI agent or with the AI tutor has to filter through mission, vision, and values. That's critical for us. Because if I roll that out to a private religious school or a public secular school, they're going to have different mission, vision, and values, and they should be able to explicitly control that with the participation, by the way, of the parents. And I think that it's really important that those things be open and on the surface, because that hidden curriculum thing, I actually I really resonate with that as a parent. I see that as a dad often. I'll hear reports back on, sort of whether it's a teacher that has clearly an agenda or has sort of an activist bent. And we want, anytime your student is interacting with the platform, for them to be interacting with or their friends. If you have an AI friend, if you are the average of your 5 closest friends, their values will start to show up in your life as your values. And so it's important that we build that in as sort of a framework for how you interact. The second question of the othering of language across different cultures, professional cultures. I haven't thought deeply about that, so I don't know that I have a strong opinion on it. I do see it, this sort of the jargonism of different cultures and sort of othering that happens there. I'd have to think more on that. I don't have a strong answer on that. No.
I think we have time for one more question from Jake, and hopefully Josh
I'll be here. Yeah, yeah.
I'll be here to answer your remarks. So one more from Jake.
Hey,
I hope so.
it feels like we're only just now, like at a societal level, coming to terms with like some of the negative externalities of like social media. And it feels like one of the reasons it's been difficult to confront that is essentially that, like as a parent, it's oftentimes difficult to take away something like social media because it's inherently social and you're isolating, you know, your child from the community that like exists online. And as a result, like uniquely, we kind of need collective action. We need regulation. We're starting to see schools or, you know, taking appropriate stances to pull phones from school at like the entire school level. So we kind of need that collective action. I'm curious, when you think about like the negative externalities of AI, which pieces of it fit that same shape where you think we'll need to like take strict like collective action versus like at an individual level, you know, you'll want to be a parent and make sure the
Yeah.
AI isn't, you know, using profanity or talking about pornography with like at an individual level.
Well, I can just tell you this is more of my personal politics. I think that you know, the best parent for your kid is their parent. And so the closer you can get to the individual with mentorship, with time invested, I think that's the place I want that action to happen. And as soon as we do that at a collective level, a lot of people get lost in the gaps of it. And so I do worry about that. I think guys like Jonathan Haidt does a really good job writing about this. Tristan Harris over at the Center for Humane Technology. I had a chance to sit with Tristan, and like in person, the man believes everything that he says he does, like in private, which I really admire. And so I'm stealing from him as I say it. But with social media, you get what you incentivize. And so with social media, you incentivize attention as the thing that we're seeking after. And if you do that for a generation, you end up with the following generation all wanting to be TikTok influencers and social media stars. And so like some of this is like regulatory oversight for sure. That's such a ham-fisted way of solving a lot of these problems. It's not to say there's not room for regulation. I think that like we're probably going to run into some monopoly law at some point, not too far down the road with OpenAI. But I think that you know, a lot of this has more to do with what are we incentivizing, what are we prioritizing, and like in the system itself, and then the economics of it. Like economics are a major driver for the way that society reacts, and the economics of AI are really opaque to me. I don't know what the future economics of AI are, because there's a lot of displacement of, you know, I can build a company on 10% of the people that I used to need. And so you know, that's the dark side of it. I don't know necessarily, I don't have answers for how regulation works on this. What I do know is there's a huge category of people that now have a ladder up that didn't have one. And if we can give them access and mentorship and time invested, I think we're all better off for it. And that's kind of the future that I'm aiming for.
Josh, I want to thank you for coming down here.